you've got to find your people when it comes to property. So I was starting to listen to lots of different podcasts, and it's a good place to start because you don't need to know everything about property, but you do need to educate yourself as much as possible. And I think that's when my journey started accelerating, it was one, through experience, like starting to get a few buys under my belt, but two, I was in the car and I was listening to podcasts and I was learning and I was not only learning about property, I was learning about the mindsets and the normality of the emotions that go through big decisions, and not letting those emotions take away, overwhelm you so you can't move forward, and holding you back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Dashdot Insider, the auditory epicenter for passionate property investors seeking a life of freedom, choice, and abundance. Joining me today, we've got a special guest, Chris Spillane. Now, the reason we're very excited to have Chris on is because Chris is very much an example of what can happen to your life if you make all of the right moves. And this is really sort of like a success story. And so a lot of you listening to the podcast may have heard us talking a lot in the past about different stages of the journey. Well, I can assure you Chris has seen just about all of them. And so it's really, really wonderful. And thank you so much, Chris. I can tell Chris is in his car at the moment because he's just sort of jumped off site from work to spend time with us and share lessons from his journey and everything with us. So thank you very much for doing this, Chris. First up, how are you feeling today?
Yeah, good, thanks. Getting blown away here in Tassie, but all good.
It's a lovely spot, Tassie. I've heard it has the cleanest air in the world.
Yeah, no, it does, and it also has 4 seasons in a day. It always keeps you guessing, but it's where I grew up, and it's home for us.
Okay. Well, I mentioned that you are very much a success story when it comes to property investing, and Dashdot have been fortunate enough to be on part of that journey with you. It started a long time ago, but if we sort of skip to the end, what does your portfolio look like at the moment?
At the moment, there's about 18 separate houses or properties. There's a couple of commercial ones in there, but there's 18 front doors, call it.
Okay, so we've got 18 doors, and how many titles are those across?
14.
So we've got 14 titles, 18 doors, so that sounds like a pretty substantial portfolio. It didn't start at 18, though. It probably started with 1. And I understand you bought your first property when you were only 19.
That's right.
So how on earth does a 19-year-old save up enough to get that first deposit? 2
jobs. I knew early that I wanted to get into wealth creation and property with my young mind, and what I'd seen was the avenue that I picked. I got an apprenticeship, and as soon as I got that, I started saving. I had a second job. I'd live off the money from my second job and then save all that apprenticeship money. And I was CommBank at the time had brought out a savings account where they would pay you monthly, and it was quite a good return. And I sort of worked out for every $1,000 in the bank. It wasn't a lot, but when you're on $7 an hour as an apprentice, you're getting $5 or $6 for every 1,000 in there per month. So it was like a bit of a game to save. So if I had 10,000, I'd get $50 for free each month, and so on. So that was a little bit of a I guess a game and a first lesson of watching your money make money for you. I knew real estate was quicker. It was just getting that deposit. So it was just about being really dedicated for a good 3 years and just working hard to be smart with my money.
Okay, and how old are you now?
34.
Okay, so it's a 15-year journey. So if you're listening to this, if you're 19 years old, there's probably a pathway for you here if you're prepared to do what Chris has done. If you're not, if you're a little bit older, like I am, some people are late starters. They didn't get the property bug until they had enough education around the topic and things like that. But there's almost certainly still going to be a way just at the moment, right? The door's kind of closing on a lot of people's ability to get into the property market at the moment. So if you're like Chris here, then you're probably sitting pretty. Now you mentioned, I've heard people say that it takes more discipline to save than to pay off debt. Can you kind of expand on that? And how is that idea involved in your property journey?
So with debt, it's structured and you're forced to pay it off. It's set. You can't just, there's repercussions if you don't pay it off. With savings, there's no repercussions if you don't save. So it takes more discipline to save week after week than it does to pay off debt, because essentially with debt, you're accountable. Your name's on the line. You sign up to debt, you have to pay it back. But if you're saving, there's no reason you can go easy on yourself and go, oh, look, I want this, I want that, and you can lose track. So in the instance of my first property, an experience that come out of that purchase was, so I went to the bank. I found a property that I was like, all right, this is good. I can build some units on the back of this block as well. So I can buy a house and I can build some units on the back of this property. This will do. And I went to the bank and I was on $13 an hour, and they looked at me and were like, what are you doing? And I said, oh, look, I want to buy this property. I've saved $45,000 in the last 3 years, which was about 20% of the purchase cost. And they looked at it and they were like, and I must have had a bit more flexibility back then, but they were like, this doesn't really add up. You're on $13 an hour, but the fact that you have been able to show week after week that you've saved like you have, we trust that you're going to be able to make the repayments. And so that was my first property purchase as a third-year apprentice.
Crikey. So that's really important. A demonstrated ability to save is going to be way more important than just showing people that you can pay off debt. Important. I reckon, I'm not a mortgage broker myself, so I don't know if banks view things in the same way. But just the fact that it takes that much more discipline to save, because you're not necessarily accountable to anyone except yourself if you don't. You're not accountable to a bank. You're not accountable to any other lender or anything like that when you're saving. It does, I think you're 100% right, it does take more discipline. The funny thing about discipline is a lot of people talk about discipline, and I think it's like a really, really important aspect of property investing or fitness or losing weight or being healthy or whatever it is that people are doing. It's sort of like, yeah, discipline, you need the discipline. And I was talking to some guys from a cash flow company, and they said, yeah, it's a bit of a misnomer. Like, most people who achieve what looks like lots and lots of discipline, it's actually they've just inculcated into their lives a whole lot of really, really healthy habits, right? So instead of waking up going, what I'm going to have for breakfast, shit, I don't know. Oh, well, there's a bakery down there, I get a croissant or something crap. The people that just sort of plan and they have a habit, and they know when they wake up they're doing this. And if you can do that financially, your paycheck comes in, okay, you're only earning $30 an hour, but you're just in the habit of, well, 1,000 of it goes over there, or 500 of it goes there. And if you just create those financial habits, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're depriving yourself. It's not like super discipline. It's probably just being organized and having some good habits that you then just stick to. That, for most people, I think would be fairly achievable, but most people just aren't conscientious enough and deliberate enough about what they do with their cash to do that. Do you want to talk us through, like, that was the first property? Then what happened after that?
I actually went to Europe. I went and did a ski season. So I gave myself a break. I'd been pretty hard. When I started my apprenticeship, I worked hard, was working at the pub of a night and on weekends as well. And I needed to reward myself. So I went over to Europe and lived in a place called Chamonix and did the ski season there. Came back home and was on the northwest coast for 3 days, and then I booked the Spirit and was like, yeah, I'm out of here. I've sort of got no ties. I'm gonna travel Australia and see where I want to end up in the world. And my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, we drove all the way up the east coast of Australia and we're looking at property prices and looking where we wanted to be. We lived on Hamilton Island for a bit, and that was good just to de-thaw because Chamonix could be minus 20 degrees some days. So it was good to just get some sun. But we'd been looking at property and where we thought was aligned with our values and what we liked. And we thought, oh, geez, this has all been really good, but geez, we're lucky in Tassie. And at that stage in 2012, it felt like the land of opportunity. It was still quite affordable to buy a house. The state had a bit of momentum. It was close to home, and it was what we knew. So we came back down, but we moved, instead of being on the northwest coast, we moved down to Hobart and got straight into some work. I picked up a job at a building company, and would just basically, then I was like, right, I need to get my foot in the door in the Hobart market. And you could feel things starting to move in Hobart. And so it was like, righto, we've got to do this. And so that was property number 3. So that was we bought our principal place of residence in Hobart, and the 2 houses we had up north, we were just renting those, and they were looking after themselves. And yeah, we got into the Hobart market, which was good, and bought something within 5 Ks of the CBD. And that was a really good experience for me, that one, because there was more strategic thinking going into that one, and trying to get close to those big cities. That was it was a nice box to tick.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of those rules of thumb, be close enough to a CBD of a big city. At the time that you're talking about, when you were looking at that purchase, I would say that's definitely would have been the smart move. And so you've decided to live in Hobart. So that's your 3rd or 4th property that you get into at that point.
That was number 3. And then the Hobart market really cranked along there, and it was quite crazy. But one thing that I noticed was commercial in Hobart hadn't moved as quick. And being a builder, a lot of the time too, I assess a property and go, what could I actually build this building for? And if I can't build it for as much as if I can build the property for as much as they're selling it for, but you've still got to buy the land, well, I go, well, look, there's money in purchasing the deal. And I noticed that with a commercial warehouse that, again, it was off the plan, and I couldn't beat it. And it actually took, I put a 10 grand deposit down, and it took the guy maybe 15 months to build it. And even in that time, that purchase price went up, and then that property's doubled. So that was a good experience. But Hobart was really like leading the charge in Australia at that stage, which was a good thing and a bad thing, because you soon start going to see properties that there's no point being in the room. You know, there's 40 buyers there, there's 30 buyers there. So then my tactic from that point was, righto, well, I need to jump up a bracket, get out of this first home buyers kind of bracket, or this affordable home buyers bracket, and I need to find the value still. So I need to jump up to, say, back in 2018, like I need to jump up to like the $500,000 bracket, just so that I can get those deals that not everyone's fighting for, and that there's good upside on them.
This is huge. This is a really big factor in the market at the moment, right? There are so many people looking for properties in the sort of 400, 450 mark, looking for detached dwellings around that. It's so hard to find them, right? Like usually if there's a detached dwelling and it's 400, the due diligence that we have to do on those properties to make sure that they actually stack up is absolutely massive. And what you mentioned there, like commercial hadn't really moved, right? The residential had moved, there's some heat in that, but the commercial hadn't. And it's finding those opportunities. And at the moment, the big opportunity around Australia looks to be units, right? It's an unusual sort of a market because so many places have had a big bump in the detached dwellings, right? And normally there's a lag before units kick into it. And so it's kind of interesting that you've in the same way that we sort of talk to clients, and we're sort of like, there are a lot of different strategies that you can use out there, and you've already listed three, right? The first one was a value add on the back with some sheds. The second one that you talked about, which was actually your third property, was but the second strategy was being close to a CBD, and now you're talking about commercial property as well. It's all about not necessarily being locked in to one kind of idea when it comes to property. Oh, I only buy things with value adds, or I only buy things that are positive cash flow, or I only buy detached dwellings, or I only buy within 3Ks of the CBD or 10Ks or whatever. Being kind of strategy agnostic and going, well, is that an opportunity? Does that stack up? How does it stack up versus other opportunities? And making really, really smart decisions around that. I think it's great that you're a builder because you can kind of assess things potentially in a different way from a lot of other people do. Like you mentioned that commercial block, you could look at it and go, well, how much would it cost me to put that on it? Gee, I couldn't do it for as cheap as that guy. I'll just buy it off him, right? Whereas for a lot of us, we drive around, we have a look at a property and we sort of scratch our heads thinking, I wonder how much it would cost to build something on that.
Yeah. No, it's just a good way. You just go, right, well, the land's free. I know it's not a brand new building, but as far as replacement, then yeah, it's you can't buy the land and build it. So if you can get into it, you can get into it. And then sort of after there, I'd sort of got my confidence up, and I started calling around. It was getting harder to get deals, but I started calling around real estate agents, and I had a few relationships with real estate agents. So I think it was number 7. A real estate agent actually brought that to my desk, and we settled on that. That's a development site, that one. It's got a house on it, so it washes its face, and that'll be a future development. But yeah, I started to get a bit of a relationship, and just started trying any tactics to find anything in Tassie that would stack up. So real estate agents were bringing things to me then, and if it worked, I would purchase it. But by about property number 9, I was like, far out. Like I've got 9 properties in Tassie. It's all my eggs are in one basket. I'm stuck on the island. Like I can't just get in the car and quickly shoot around New South Wales, or shoot up to Queensland, or shoot up to Victoria and check something once I've found it. So I thought, well, I need to find a way to be able to buy property outside of Tasmania. Also at that stage too, I was pretty passionate about property, and it's not something that you can really talk to people, or I actually don't recommend. You've got to find your people when it comes to property. So I was starting to listen to lots of different podcasts, and it's a good place to start because you don't need to know everything about property, but you do need to educate yourself as much as possible. And I think that's where, when my journey started accelerating, it was 1, through experience, like starting to get a few buys under my belt, but 2, I was in the car and I was listening to podcasts, and I was learning, and I was not only learning about property, I was learning about the mindsets and the normality of the emotions that go through big decisions, and not letting those emotions take away, overwhelm you so you can't move forward, and holding you back. So I'd been listening. It wasn't Dashdot originally that I reached out to. I got a property off another buyer's agent, and we bought 2 in Brisbane, and they've worked really well. They were fine, but I was testing the market. I was testing buyers agents, and who I liked, and it was I touched base with Dashdot and told them my story, and they had a lot of due diligence, and they had a lot of depth and a lot of team members that not only was it about sort of buying the next property, but it was also coming up with the plan. And that's where I'd sort of needed, I felt too, I needed the help. I needed to align myself with a group of people that could help me with strategy, that that had good experience and that could, because I'd really grunted my way through my sort of first 9. Like I'd just work hard, save, and just buy and repeat. But I was like, I need to align with a team, because I've got a really good team. I've got a good accountant, a good mortgage broker, and then I was basically sourcing. But I need to align myself with a team if I'm to go further. I'm open to new ideas, and that will show me something that I don't know, because you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, there are a lot of unknown unknowns. And something that you're talking about here that I think is really important is a lot of people know property, right? And you know a lot more than most, being a builder, right? You have that background, so you can understand property very well. And a lot of people listening to the podcast understand property very well. Understanding portfolios it's a different thing. Sort of, we kind of know intrinsically, oh yeah, well, that one's a little bit positive, that one's a little bit negative, they kind of cancel out, I'm trying to get the growth, blah, blah, blah. We kind of know a little bit about it, like maybe intrinsically or intuitively. But the difference between that and, like you said, right, like having it all planned out methodically, so that, yeah, well, the next type of property that you might need is going to be this one. And then after that, then this becomes the constraint, or this is the problem that your portfolio has that we solve for. And every time you purchase a property, you're kind of creating a problem for your portfolio, because you've used equity or you've used cash flow, or probably both, right, in terms of how the bank is looking at your numbers. And so making sure that the next property that you get is solving for the next problem that's going to come along becomes really important. And that kind of thing, you can be a builder, you could have been a builder for 40 years, but it's a different kind of skill set to understand how to lay out the properties and get them in the right order so that you can really accelerate your journey. Now, I'll talk about the acceleration a little bit, but before we do, I'd really love to know your perspective on a really key kind of idea that pops up again and again and again. We talk at Dashdot about hitting save, and that is when the stress just kind of disappears. It's when you know that you're financially sorted. And normally it happens around about the 5 property mark. In your case, and it's totally fine if there wasn't, but was there any kind of emotional, mental shift that happened when you hit 5 out of the 14/18 that you have now?
I guess I had less emotional attachment to the buyers after that. I was a lot more comfortable with outsourcing, or I was just a lot more trusting in even property, I guess, as the asset class, because I'd seen the growth in my other properties, and then how quickly that goes. Well, I've just made that equity growth without going to work, and geez, that's easy. And I think once you start to see the results, you trust the mantra, and I think there's just that kind of bit of compounding going on. Like it starts with your saving, then it starts with your first purchase, and then it rolls into your second purchase. When a house basically is covering its costs and moving ahead with growth, you just stand out of its way and let it do its thing. And it doesn't take a lot of work to do it. Like, I have 18 front doors. It's not like I'm flat out managing it. I'm not saying it doesn't take some management, but yeah, it's quite passive. And they always say that, wealthy people, they use leverage and they use time to their advantage. And once you start to understand how debt just gets washed away by time, you actually, just as much as acquiring property is, you want to kind of acquire good debt, because the good debt just erodes.
Right. And so now you're at the 14/18 titles and front doors, which is fantastic. But you also mentioned when we were talking before that the current property purchase that you're looking at the moment is the one that you're most excited about. How come? What's the deal with that one?
So basically, the strategy that I've been working on with my team at Dashdot is there's 5 purchases that get me to my passive income. I wouldn't even say target, because it's well above what I ever thought I would need, but it's part of seeing this plan play out. Property number 3 through Dashdot is the last growth asset. And so with the portfolio, it's all moving upwards in growth. And then the next stage, once they've hit fruition, it will be selling off assets in the right sequence and then moving that money into more cash yielding assets, so that it basically moves into going from growth to weekly income.
So that's the important transition. I hear a lot of people in the property space talk about the different phases that you go through as a property investor. And the old model used to be something like save, get your first property, right? Maybe you live in it, maybe you don't. Maybe you rent vest, maybe you're living with mum and dad, whatever it is. You get that first property. And then it's like, oh, now I've got to save, get some growth in that and get the second one. And once you've got those first little foundational pieces, then you go into an accumulation phase. And that's when you're trying to buy one every 3 or 4 years. And then some people might have an acceleration phase. And then you have the cash flow phase. And that's when all of this growth that you've been experiencing and all that equity build, suddenly you can sell down, you sell half of them and pay off the others, and everything just becomes cash flow. Or some people like sell a lot of them and end up buying higher yielding properties worth the equivalent amount of equity for the cash flow. So it kind of sounds like that's pretty close to where you are at the moment.
Yeah, that's the plan. And that's sort of what's nice about this purchase is, for me, in a way, and I've got to just mentally adjust to it, but it's sort of the first time in 19 years that I'm not saving for a deposit. So even in a way, my cash position as of this purchase is better because I'm not designating funds to save for the next deposit. That's all me, because the machine's been built. There's 18 properties. If they all creep up at a certain percentage each year, it's you do the sums on it, and it's its own beast now.
Yeah, if you've got 18 properties, if each one had a terrible year and only went up by $10,000 each, that's still 180 grand in equity that's just popped up, right? You'll be able to find a place for that. All right. Now, I also mentioned in those phases that there's an acceleration phase. Was there any point in your property journey where suddenly, like when you're starting off and it's like, yeah, I got one, 3 years later, 4 years later, got enough to get into number two, and it seems like it's just going to take so long. And then sort of like a few years later, it's number three, or a year after that, or 2 years or 3 years after that, it's number four. What about that kind of acceleration phase? Did that ever sort of hit your portfolio, or is it just an urban myth?
No, it definitely does. And I think you get a bit more slap happy at it. There was only 3 or 4 years ago for me, I sort of even say from 30 to 34, there's about 9 purchases there. So it was just going bang, bang, bang. And to be honest, a lot of the time, because it's my passion, it's not my wife's passion, but a lot of the time I'd buy a house and I just wouldn't even say anything to my wife for a while, just as a bit of a, it's a day in the life, you know what I mean? And it's kind of becomes, when it's a passion and it's a hobby and the emotion is so, you do it for the enjoyment, but it's not like you're having super highs on it. You just sort of, you nearly play a game with it, like, yep, bought another one. Oh, yep. How's your day? Yep, cool. Oh, that's good. And then maybe 2 days later, oh, by the way, bought a house in Brisbane or bought a house in WA. Oh, yeah. And Meg's fully just trusts me now. Like she's the same. It's just like probably a simpler decision than buying a car, because a car is a depreciating asset. So when you're buying assets that go up in value, it's actually a simpler decision than most, because yes, there's a large amount of value, but it's a step in the right direction.
And not telling your wife, that is sort of, at one level, it's pretty hilarious. But at the same time, if your wife's anything like mine, she's buying crap all the time. She's buying stuff and she doesn't tell me about it. Like if you see a Home and Garden magazine open on the coffee table, right?
Yeah.
If you see one of those, something in that magazine will appear in your house in the next 6 months, right? but they're not obvious about it, right? It's not just going to be there one day. It'll start off in the box in the wardrobe, right? And it'll gradually migrate its way to the dining table. And then when did we get that? And it'll be, oh, we've had that for ages, kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it. That's it. No, she knows it's sort of my hobby. You know, I like to, I'm passionate about my trade and my business, and I'm passionate about property and coffee, music, and surfing, and I'm a happy man. So I just share that around, and it's just another day in the life.
So you're about to transition from going into the accumulation phase and transition into a cash flow phase, right? That's sort of, you're on the cusp at that point. And when you go into that cash flow phase, the numbers on that are looking pretty good?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. And so does that mean retirement? Are you going to down tools, just spend the rest of your life doing the things that you love? Or are you going to sort of hang on to some work and that sort of thing? What's the plan from here?
I think I thought as a 15-year-old kid planning for this stage, as a 20-year-old planning for this stage, that it would be retirement. But retirement it's a bit of an ugly word in a way, because and I'm lucky because I've got a job that I just love. I've got good guys that work for me, and I want to look after them. I want to actually help and guide them on their journey. I can choose how much I work moving forward. And I guess life is just a big balance. And I've been so heavily focused on the growth of this, and I've enjoyed the journey. I've loved the grind, but I've got a 2.5-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they're probably one of the most powerful things for me to just sort of center me and keep me in check, knowing when enough is enough, which I think is a big thing. And it's really about time, because I'm half of the reason I'm in the position I'm in is because I don't have a lot of big running costs. I'm not into Louis Vuitton and Dodge Rams. Like, it's just not who I am. I was born and raised in a family where it was just, feet on the ground, humble beginnings. You don't look people up and down and go, oh, well, they've got this, they've got that, therefore I've got to be nicer to them or whatever, or respect them any differently. So I'm cheap to run, and that's where my passive income number is just, it's the one that I've formulated with Dashdot. It's well above my means. So I think, considering I have so many passions, I'll just make sure I stick in those and start giving back to people.
Yeah, well, I won't ask you what the actual number is, because I know that can often be a very, very private number for people. But I can imagine that it's pretty healthy. You don't struggle with 18 doors. It's probably not just a scraping by sort of a number. It's probably pretty affluent. I remember when we were talking before we started recording, you talked about the impact that your family, your father had, and your mother had on your property journey. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, my start to life was pretty interesting. When I was 2, my dad was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. So he was given 18 months to live. He blocked a lot of it out. I can't exactly remember how many years he lived. It might have been, I think I was grade 5 when he died. But that start to life was really, I guess, traumatizing, but also the silver lining in it was like, well, at a young age, you have learnt that nothing's guaranteed. That, I think he was under 40 when he died, which is a scary thought. And I just learnt from a young age, you've got to seize the day. You've got to, if you want something, go after it and don't waste it away. And I think I was lucky how my mum, she explained that theory too. She was a nurse, so that was the big reason Dad could stay home for a lot of his sort of decay. But Mum was super open about it. Even as kids, I guess she was not treating us like adults, but she was talking. She was very open about things, and she's brutally honest, which is probably where I get my honesty from as well. But we just had to grow up, and one one thing that I know that took a lot of pressure off mum was mum and dad had built, they were on their own property journey early in life as well. And they had say 4 units or something, or five houses sort of at that stage. And I think it was me noticing that there was that security, because mum couldn't work all the time. She was working everything she could, but there was just that security, and she didn't play the easy card either and just sell out, sell them all and buy a big house and go on a pension, which people had said. She just pushed hard through it and made it all work, and raised my sister and I whilst looking after a husband that was, by the end of it, couldn't walk and everything else, and ended up having to be the youngest person in a nursing home because that's the only place that could look after him. But it really, I guess, hammered home that, we're only here for a certain amount of time, and you don't know when your time is up. And then to add to that, probably the other silver lining of it all was, because of that, I didn't grow up in a house of that had a lot. Like, by no means did we, we certainly weren't the poorest kids around or anything like that. But mum was tight, and she was big on, if we wanted something, she would never buy it, but she would always show us how to get it. She'd break it down. She'd be like, righto, well, if you go get this job, you save this much a week, after 10 weeks, you'll have it. As simple as that. And just building that process and learning that at a young age. And then, as soon as I could get a job, I had a job, and just starting like that and understanding. And, as a kid, I was buying crap. It was baby steps, it was like, it was an iPod, or then it was, I had to buy my next car. But it was, it was surfboards, it was things. But then it moved into, well, hold on, no, I want to get into property. I want to live a life a life of choice. And yeah, she sort of set me up with good financial habits that have carried me well today. So, and it's something that, I'm always trying to improve on, and you're always learning. And I think that was a big thing too that I realized after a while. I think when I'd passed what mum had done, and was far younger, I was like, you do learn, you can only take so much from each peer or each person, and you've got to try and find other like-minded people or other people who've gone even further, and get those nuggets of gold off them, or run along next to them. So she certainly, that early start of life certainly sort of set me up at the start, but it's just been continual learning and continually just pushing for that life of choice and freedom that was burnt into me from a kid.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a really, really nice note to finish the episode on. Chris, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing your story, and I'm sure it's an inspiration to a lot of people who are listening, and just shows you what's possible. And sure, it's not the same environment in the property market as it was in 2009 when you're 19 and ripping into it all. But, the early days, they sound like they weren't super fast. They were pretty slow. But then the momentum really kicks in just the last 5-6 years. Like, if you keep on getting the right properties in the right order early on, you reach some point and then suddenly it just sort of snowballs. And you end up with that rapid expansion before you know it. You're just looking around the corner at retirement if you want, but at least you've got the choice. And that I think is the absolute most important thing. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks. See ya. Thanks.